So we'll start by setting our motivation. So we reflect on our purpose is the study of the Lamrim, the Buddha's sutra teachings presented in their most refined, clearest, most easily understandable way. Thinking how fortunate we are to be able to take advantage of the extraordinary work of these great masters, Lama Atisha, Lama Tsongkhapa, these different extraordinary beings from the past that have made it so easy to understand the Buddha's final meaning. So we rejoice that we are able to yet again awaken in a perfect human rebirth and apply ourselves to understanding the Buddha's teachings, his wisdom. And the reason for doing that is to unlock our own highest potential, so that we may be of the same benefit as Shakyamuni Buddha. That we may lead countless sentient beings out of confusion into wisdom. So we generate these minds of confidence, refuge, and bodhicitta. All right. So today is Thursday. I'm 100% sure that I thought Monday was Thursday. It wasn't. It was Monday. But we have reached Thursday. So we've caught up to where I was. So that's good. We can now just move forward. So, any thoughts or questions from Monday's class? Nope. So we
Just a quickie. Sorry, I don't know if this is going to be a quick answer from you. You were talking about karma, or the fact that by realizing emptiness, that basically tell me if I'm wrong, all karma is eradicated. Is that correct? Is that how you put it, or something like that?
It loses any potency to bring a result.
So when you die and you enter the clear light and emptiness, you're still carrying your karma. So I don't quite know how that works then. If you've lessened it by experiencing it before you die, when you die, you still are taking your karma. Your karma is moving you into your next lifetime. So I'm a little confused there.
Because You're saying that because at the time of death, the mind of clear light arises? Is that what you're getting at? Is that the part of it that...
Correct.
So, yeah, so the mind of clear light, in and of itself, the mind of clear light doesn't hold any special meaning or bring any particularly special result. Um, it's simply the subtlest level of the mind that can be experienced. During the death process, we go from being able to talk and observe outside things that are outside of oneself, and being able to generate conceptual thoughts about what we perceive, and that's all quite coarse, all quite gross. And then that begins to fall away. We lose conceptuality, we lose perception, we lose the ability to think in words and communicate, and as the mind is just naturally absorbing and becoming more and more subtle. And at a certain point, the mind can't become any more subtle than it is. And we call that the mind of clear light. In the next moment, the consciousness leaves the body and enters the intermediate state. And at that moment is more coarse than it previously was, because it now has a subtle energetic form, and it now is able to, due to the power of thought, go here and there and so on. So then in the intermediate state, that experience is a bit coarser than the mind of clear light. And then at some point, that consciousness exits the intermediate state, enters a womb or takes some sort of rebirth, and becomes even more and more coarse up until a fully functioning rebirth is happening. And then again, the mind is at its most coarse for the remainder of that particular lifetime. The benefit of the mind of clear light for a tantric practitioner only comes about when that mind is joined with wisdom, understanding, emptiness. You have to have generated direct realization of emptiness, and then you join that with the mind of clear light. The mind of clear light, simply as the subtlest type of mind, is a very powerful mind if it can be harnessed and joined with wisdom realizing emptiness. So for a tantric practitioner, if they can hold the mind in clear light whilst absorbed in concentration on emptiness, they may achieve enlightenment at death doing that. They may not, just like a person who sees emptiness directly in daily life, in their actual living life, and even if they become a tantric practitioner, they may or may not advance to the level where they fully achieve enlightenment. But the for a person who does directly, fully see emptiness directly, then they are not negatively impacted going for whatever remainder they have, whatever additional time between that moment and their enlightenment. They gain complete control. They essentially will achieve enlightenment if they can, as long as they just continue in that. And they basically, all that you do after you directly perceive the nature of reality is you just repeat that. You just again and again repeat that experience, and you purify the mind in deeper and deeper ways, in terms of the the stains, the imprints. So there's the actual seeds, the actual karmic seeds, but then you also have the imprints of those seeds, and those are subtler. The imprints of those seeds take more time to fully eradicate, and that's why you have to repeat that experience for some period of time. And the Vajrayana practice really just helps you do that more quickly. It just sort of is a more powerful way. But we all, dogs, cats, gerbils, they're all going to experience the mind of clear light as they die, and we will too. And it has no, in and of itself, it has no purifying power, no spiritual benefit.
Thank you.
Yeah, go to.
I'm sorry, I have a heavy breathing dog. There's a lightning storm just passed by. So pertaining to this topic, then, does the realizing emptiness burn the seeds so that they are impotent and can't grow?
Yeah. Any negativities, if it's a direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness, then that will cut off the continuum of suffering for that. And then all they have to do is just keep repeating that experience until even the subtle imprints of those negativities have also been eliminated.
So when you say keep repeating, like the clearing, does that mean lifetime after lifetime, or in this lifetime we'll forget by the next lifetime?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to say how I don't know if it depends on kind of the stores of merit that have been built up in that for that particular. I don't think that there's an exact number that can be given for how many additional sessions of meditation, because it all has to be, because you see emptiness directly, and then you arise from that experience, and you're still not enlightened, and so you're still going about your life. So it's really in meditative equipoise, and of course, so it depends on for one, whether the person is a tantric practitioner, whether they're joining that with the mind of clear light, or because you can see emptiness directly without the mind of clear light causing the mind of clear light to arise, because Theravadan practitioners are also seeing emptiness directly when they achieve arhatship, and they're not using the mind, they're not practicing tantra. But I don't know if there's like an average, or because of course you could die, and then I don't fully understand exactly, because they say that that's really the only realization that isn't lost at death. Like you can achieve calm abiding, and Buddhism would say that we've all achieved calm abiding many times over, in as maybe in other religious systems, or just someone who enjoyed meditating on the breath, or what have you. But that you lose that, you have some imprints of that, but you don't. But with emptiness, it's different. There's some really fundamental continuity of that between lifetimes, and that practitioner gains control. They're no longer born just thrown by their karma. They gain complete control over the process of rebirth. So of course, I mean, you don't find 10-year-olds talking about their realization of emptiness, but so I don't know exactly how it works. I think it sort of has to be activated again through additional practice, but that it very easily, gets activated in that next life. And then I guess they just sort of generally keep quiet about it. But I don't.
Besides emptiness, realizing emptiness, is there anything else that burns up our karmic seeds? Thank you.
So we'll talk in the next. So in terms of that, it's the most powerful. That is the most powerful way of doing it, and ultimately, because if something else, there's nothing else that we can rely on fully to 100% completely separate the mind from negativity. There is no other practice that, but in the next contemplation, Lama Zopa is going to give us additional things that are in the category of purification, meaning that they do bring the result of, just like Vajrasattva practice, which Vajrasattva practice also works in the same way, in that you did create the negative seed. The negative seed is there, but by engaging in Vajrasattva practice, it loses its potency, or its potency is reduced. As we said, maybe it would have ripened as a really terrible suffering, but it instead ripens in a very light way. So you've really drastically cut down the potency of that karmic seed. So we can rely on other practices, but nothing is as effective as directly realizing emptiness is effective. But that's a very specific thing that either we can or we can't do. Either we have or we have not seen emptiness directly. So it isn't that, as a practical matter, these other things that we can do just by virtue of being alive, we really ought to be doing, because they also bring a similar kind of result. They work in a very similar way, and they're also effective, and we can just do them because they exist. Whereas you either have or you have not seen emptiness directly. Now, as I said before, there's probably arguments to make about how, did I do Vajrasattva with, the strongest bodhicitta? Did I do it with the most undistracted kind of mind? I think that there are factors that you can talk about that influence that process. But still, we can refine those practices in a way that doesn't depend necessarily on fully qualified calm abiding. It doesn't depend on these vast storehouses of merit, and so on, that entering the path of seeing is going to require. So, I mean, your question really is like, how quickly does a bodhisattva go through the grounds and paths once they enter the path of seeing up to the path of no more learning? And I don't know, because they say if you're a tantric practitioner, you'll definitely complete that in 14 lifetimes. But still, I don't know, like, many of those could still be before the path of seeing. Could be that the path of seeing is just one lifetime. Could be that's the 14th lifetime. I really don't know. Or it's the 13th or the 12th, and you needed these, and then of course they say that the bodhisattva path, the mean is 3 countless great eons. So, and it's 3 fortunate countless great eons. So 3 countless great eons combined with the perfect human rebirth. So you can't even include all of the lower realm rebirths that might be kind of happening. So it's much slower, obviously, but I don't think that there's like a definitive amount of time between the path of seeing and the path of no more learning. But all you're doing, I mean, you're engaging in terms of the bodhisattva path. You're engaging in supportive practices, but that are helping you to accumulate the like I said, the stores of merit. So you're engaging in the perfection of generosity and patience and all of these supportive merit making processes. But really, I mean, the door to enlightenment is through emptiness. And then you're engaging in these supportive practices. So you could say without the supportive practices, you probably wouldn't be able to progress through the grounds and paths. But that progression is particularly characterized by the repetition of absorbing the mind in emptiness. So there's maybe different ways of talking about it. Okay, so in day 202, Lama Zopa is going to give us 6 different things that are part of what qualifies as purification practice. So the first is prostrating and reciting the holy names of the Buddhas, such as the 35 confession Buddhas. Second is reciting purifying mantras, such as the Vajrasattva mantra. Third is making holy objects, such as tankas, statues, and satsas. Fourth is reciting the Prajnaparamita sutras or texts. He gives the example of the Heart Sutra or the Diamond Cutter Sutra. But the Prajnaparamita text, there's a pretty wide, range of different texts that are considered perfection of wisdom texts. But those are just some examples. Meditating on emptiness, and then meditating on emptiness, kama, bodhicitta, and similar subjects. I'm not sure what similar subjects means, except to say, as we've said before, that all of the Lamrim does, in a way, count as purification, because the more we're familiar with impermanence and karma and refuge, and these are positive, beneficial states of mind that are supplanting ignorance and afflicted states. And whenever we become familiar with a positive mental state and strengthen that familiarity, that positive mental state, then necessarily we weaken the pathways of negativity, because we're crowding out that way of thinking by practicing its opposite. So could be what is meant is any of the Lamrim topics. And then making offerings to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then he says that Vajrasattva is considered supreme. And then he says, but there are others that are also very effective. So he gives the example of Nungnes as one example, which is a 2-day fasting practice done in conjunction to Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion. So a person, so like I said, to go through one Nungne is a 2-day practice. You eat on the first day, and then you fast you eat one meal, and then you fast. And so and it can be done more strictly or less strictly. Sometimes they don't even drink water. Sometimes they won't even swallow their own. They'll carry a cup, so they're not even getting the benefit of their own saliva. I haven't done it that strictly. That's pretty intense. But you don't drink water on the second day. Even you don't, unless you have like a real health. If a person has a real health issue, then they can drink water. And if they need to take pills like medications, they can take water to do that. But so that's a fasting. So you join meditations and recitations and prostrations with fasting for Nungnes. Yes, Shayla.
Is a noonday ever going to be scheduled at the center?
I don't know. I mean, I assume when we talked about it, um, what came up was the retreat boundary, which can be, but because technically, since it's a retreat, if you're going to do it, you should, well, I mean, to do it in a strict way, you have to establish a retreat boundary, which means no one participating in the retreat should go beyond that boundary, unless they're going to die or something. And some people would die rather than violate a retreat boundary, depending on the person and the purpose of their retreat and so on. If it's like a 3-year, anyway, it's up to the person. But generally, I would say go ahead and get medical treatment. That's my, I don't want to encourage anyone not to break a retreat boundary if they need medical attention. But so because the center is non-residential and we really can't have people staying overnight, we weren't sure about it. I know, but at Land of Medicine Buddha, when they do it, the retreat boundary is like the whole campus, which, so there's the Gompa, but then you're leaving and you're going back to, I don't know how much different that is than saying that the retreat boundary is like Santa Fe, and you're just going back to your hotel, and staying there, and you're just not doing anything other. So it's come up, but we kind of haven't looked at the issue of retreat boundaries. But it's something to think about. Yeah, it's something that would be nice to do this year with, because we'll actually have I shouldn't put that on the internet, but what the plans are for the because we haven't announced, but it should be it's something that we'll look into, I think. And sometimes people will do multiple nungnes in a row. You can do a week of them, or you can schedule them like that, or you just keep doing them. Some people have done years of nungne, which is extraordinary. They just don't stop. They're just eating once every other day for years, and it's amazing. Okay, so he mentions that as really powerful, as a really powerful purification practice. And then there's because some of these categories are a bit broad, where he says, reciting purification mantras. So I don't know exactly what is or isn't also being, included there, because there's Dorje Kadro is another common practice. As far as I can tell, it doesn't require empowerment. There's a sadhana, FPMT has a sadhana, and there's nothing on the page about it requiring any kind of empowerment for Dorje Kadro. And then there's Samaya Vajra, which is that is a tantric practice that does require empowerment, but it's which is probably because he says this is according to Sutra. He said that this list was according to Sutra, which is why Samaya Vajra wouldn't be listed, but Dorje Kadro might be included under the category of mantra. I'm not sure. But those are two others that I'm familiar with, Dorje Kadro and Samayavadra. Okay. Any thoughts or questions about day 202? Okay, so day 203, Lama Yeshe is now taught, the quotation is cleansing the mind is an evolutionary process. So here he's talking about kind of what's come up before, that people, in one way of talking, people are different and they struggle in different ways with different negativities. Like, as we've said, one person might be really short-tempered, but attachment doesn't really arise for them very strongly. Another person's very kind, but they have extreme issues with attachment. And so it's useful to kind of think about individually, what is it that is most impactful, kind of triaging in a way our karma, like, where do I start? What for me is going to get me into trouble most powerfully, and kind of focusing on that. Because if in this life there isn't, say there isn't much attachment, or there isn't much anger, what have you, then that's not where we need to initially put our efforts. But if we struggle, with one particular thing, well, then that's where we're going to be actively creating negative karma, and that's where we should really initially kind of be more focused. From an enlightenment perspective, that's still, a bit different, because we have imprints, and there's imprints of many things, and so that's a bit different. This is more so just like in my actual behavior in this life, what is it that is going to land me in hot water, in jail? Where is it that what do I really need to work on in order to what am I really struggling with? And then there's another way of thinking about it too, which is like, within any given negativity, we're going to be triggered in progressive ways. So the easiest, as we're trying to purify hatred, let's say, then the kinds of things that then maliciously taking the lives of other people with true depravity, true malice, that kind of imprint in the mind is going to be the first to go, when as we're purifying, because it requires really strong, really sustained, really powerful hatred or what have you. But so at a certain point, like, we'll become someone who really can't be stirred to that level of affliction. But for a person who's accomplished that, still, they certainly might, raise their voice in anger, in frustration, because they haven't. That doesn't require the same sustain. That's just a more momentary kind of lapse of the mind, and it's more difficult to get rid of that than it is to be able to restrain yourself from killing someone, out of a real, and even at that point, like they might kill if they feel threatened. They might not kill out of a sense of malice, but if they feel threatened, then they haven't purified that imprint, that kind of self-protective imprint that still could be certainly operating. So within each of the negativities, there's kind of a level of what triggers particular actions, and how strong and how sustained that imprint is, and what kind of negativity can be generated by that. And so we will, as we're purifying these tendencies, we will naturally get rid of the things that are the most intense, that require the greatest degree of being, activated, and then it'll become more and more subtle. You know, so eventually, we won't even be able to be, we won't even experience, mild irritation or mild frustration, because we've purified that sort of tendency toward anger down to that really, really subtle level where we don't. And of course, going along with that, even if we're attacked, even if we are, criticized, what have you, or physically attacked, we won't respond with anger in a situation like that, because these tendencies have been purified. But yeah.
I needed that like 2 weeks ago.
Huh. Yep, Coda.
And I know that's a wonderful thing. That seems very far away sometimes. But in the moment when one or I am definitely feeling my self-cherishing eye kind of going, please stay back. I feel really uncomfortable with you in my face right now. Or I'm cornered, or, just somebody coming at me because they need or want something from me. Do you have a quick something just to like, thank you?
No, I mean, I think it's all a process of, becoming familiar in meditation with these antidotes, because even the examples that you gave, they're going to be dependent on a variety of different factors, like who exactly the person is, like what our history, because we might forgive or tolerate, something from someone who doesn't really seem to have a history of acting in a certain way. Whereas if there's another person who does have that history, just by seeing them, we're going to be on guard. We're going to be kind of expecting that they're going to say or do something that fits the pattern that we feel like we've observed. And it also is going to depend on the kind of day that we're having. If we didn't sleep well, or if we've had a succession of other, difficult experiences that day, and the mind just has lost all spaciousness, then, we'll easily fall into something more so. So, I think what we draw on, and I think I think it's also that people are different, just people's personalities, people's temperaments, and people's karmic kind of predispositions for what kinds of antidotes they've practiced in, more so, not just in this life, but maybe more so the recent past lives. And some people are maybe more analytical than others. Some people are more kind of, tapping into the visceral or emotive side of things more easily. So I think there's all kinds of things. So really, I think it's, in a way, it's trial and error for oneself in terms of what a person finds effective. One of the contemplations that I mean, like I said, I don't think that it is helpful necessarily to be like, oh, I like this one, because I'm me and I'm not other people. But something that is kind of general is understanding that death can come at any time, and do I want this to be one of the most recent imprints in my mind? You know, because I find that kind of cuts off the kind of talk in the mind that justifies, what's arising, because we can see that it's painful. We can see that, even if we feel like you were saying, we feel cornered, we feel spoken to in a particular way. And so in a very conventional sense, then we rationalize, and in that conventional sense, it's not unreasonable to get our hackles up and to be, but if we put it in the context of that, that heat in the mind, that agitation, that disturbing quality of what I responded with, what if I die tonight? What if, or I die tomorrow? Do I want that to be kind of muddying that process because it's so close to the time of death? Now, of course, we're not good at really believing in the immediacy of the possibility of our death, so that's an obstacle for that one. But a lot of it just has to do with what we're familiar, what familiarities we've developed in meditation. So of course they say emptiness is the most effective, but it's often not the thing that in a practical way is easiest to bring up in that moment, that it requires a lot of previous study and reflection to have that tool kind of easily available to the mind. We can try to do that. We can use all of this later, in meditation, applying antidotes, even if and when we don't in the moment. But any other thoughts or questions? Okay, so day 204, Lama Zopa says, our whole attitude to life changes totally when we understand karma. So here, this is kind of related to the previous contemplation where Lama Zopa was saying, that as practitioners, we can use the understanding of karma to generate, vast merit. It's kind of similar to that, because here we have an explanation and an understanding of links suffering and happiness to causes of suffering and happiness. Because we go through life without an understanding of karma. We go through life just thinking, that, oh, this happened randomly, or that happened randomly, and it was pleasant or it was unpleasant. And, it seems like if I have a lot of money, I can intentionally trigger, access or contact with more and more of these sorts of things, and I can successfully or relatively, comparatively successfully be separated from these other things that seem painful when they arise. And so then we think, oh, well, the purpose of my life is to get as much money as I can, so that's what I can do. I can bring these things into my experience. I can separate myself from these other things. But we don't recognize that if we're successful in business or what have you, that's a karmic ripening. And it might be persistent over a period of time in the one lifetime that we can remember, and that we have access to, but it is itself a karmic ripening. And the way that we think about positive, pleasant and unpleasant, that's a karmic ripening. The extent to which and there are some people certainly who have access to resources, but they don't find it's not effective for them in even carrying that out conventionally. They're miserable even though they're surrounded by luxury and so on, because their mind is so deeply familiar with not being satisfied and wanting more. And then they might get it, into drugs, and they might go down a whole kind of painful, unproductive cycle. And so understanding that all of it's a karmically driven process is going to allow us to actually create the real causes of happiness and to truly avoid the causes of suffering, by engaging in virtue and avoiding non-virtue. And that's everything that is arising as karmic appearance, as the ripening of karma, is driven by that deeper, subtle process that isn't apparent, that isn't easily understandable. But by developing confidence in the teachings on karma, we have access to adopting the things that truly are supportive and rejecting the things that truly drive the process of suffering. And also, an additional benefit that he mentions is that holding that understanding gives us a resiliency in the face of negativity, by recognizing, as they say, the wheel of sharp weapons is returning to me, and well, my this mind was associated with a different form in a past life, engaged in an unskillful action, and now I'm experiencing the fruition of that unskillful action. And so, whereas we otherwise might respond with anger to harm, or we might respond, in some, now we have resiliency in being able to maintain a peaceful mind and kind of think, well, this is my opportunity to cut off that cycle, to, just patiently accept this difficult circumstance and not perpetuate another cycle of suffering by responding to harm with harm, which is just going to, it's like if I just patiently accept the slap that I'm receiving in this life, which is karmically driven by the harm that I extended to that person in a previous life, then now in the next life, maybe that person, maybe we'll be best friends, maybe we'll be, spiritual practitioners together, or, I'm going to end this unproductive cycle of suffering in relation to this sentient being. I'm going to choose to end that cycle in this life and not just allow this negative cycle to be extended, since it was extended, it is returning from a past life, but no more. I will end it here.
That's my new mantra. Thank you very much, Vendi.
And then, of course, another layer of that is understanding that our interest, our propensity, our desire to respond in that unproductive way that we're actively having to tamp down is also karma, is also the fact that we have a tendency that's easier, that way of relating is kind of the path of least resistance. And so we're really good at practicing that. We've practiced it many times over beginningless past lives. And so it's become second nature. And now we find it a bit difficult not to do that. But really, it is our own propensity for responding in an unskillful way that is the problem, and not even the fact that we've been harmed, but that we have a tendency or a desire or an interest in responding unskillfully to that harm, which is also our karma. And understanding that when we were harmed, it was because of the same karmic process. The other person also practiced the path of least resistance over beginningless past lives. And so they also found it incredibly difficult to choose something else, and they did not. And so, that's the teaching on not getting angry at the stick. That's the teaching on, if we're going to want to get angry at something, we get angry at the existence of delusion. We get angry at the fact that sentient beings, like ourselves and all other sentient beings, are under the influence of afflicted states of mind. And therefore, we use that as fuel to overcome the afflictions, recognizing how tragic and how painful it is that oneself and all other sentient beings are under the influence of these afflicted states that are so strong that they often, aren't able to choose in that moment a more productive way of responding to that. So, Lama Zopa says when someone attacks us, we get angry at them, which is similar to if they were to pick up a stick and beat us with it, it's like getting angry at the stick when they're just being used by the afflictions, just like the stick is being used by the person. The person is really just being animated by the afflictions. And so getting angry at the afflictions makes much more sense than getting angry at the vehicle that the afflictions used to bring about that negative result. Any thoughts or questions? Any thoughts or questions? No? All right, so we'll just end there on day 204, and we'll pick up day 205. We may well end on Monday then with this, so then we would pick up the next chapter on Thursday, a little bit ahead of schedule. Any final thoughts or questions? All right, so we'll then recollect our motivation. I think that by having listened and participated, we've actualized that motivation, created positive energy in the mind. I think that we offer that positive energy for the benefit of all sentient beings without exception. Thinking when that positive energy ripens, we want it to ripen in ways that directly support our spiritual development, our spiritual goals. And those goals themselves are for the purpose of being of benefit to sentient beings. So think of how you would like to dedicate the positive energy that you've created in that supportive spiritual way. All right, so we will pick up on Monday.
Or we could start calling Monday Thursday.